Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. I am your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very, very accomplished professional who has moved into the social sector area, Mr. Sanjay Purohit. Sanjay, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Sanjay is the chief curator of a societal platform, EkStep Foundation, which works on a systemic method to resolve complex societal challenges with speed, at scale, and sustainably. Worked for several corporates for the last 3 decades and is passionate about mentoring startup entrepreneurs. So, Sanjay, let's talk about EkStep Foundation. Tell me about this venture.
So EkStep Foundation is the foundation of Rohini and Nandan Nilekani, which they also co-founded along with Shankar Maruwadato.
Mhm.
The primary objective of the foundation is to enable societal change at scale. And at that foundation, we work in the area of education. We work in the area of different kinds of digital public technologies. And we have been furthering this idea of societal thinking and societal platform, which is where my focus and my energy is, to saying, how do you drive large scale systemic change using platform thinking?
Wonderful. So, when you say, and I'll quote your phrase, which is systemic method to resolve complex societal challenges with speed, at scale, sustainably, help me understand this with an example, and also tell me a little bit about what are some of these complex societal challenges.
So if you look at the challenges that lie ahead of us, they obviously can be characterized through, for example, the Sustainable Development Goals, or they can be characterized by important human development indicators, or they could also be simply characterized by sectors such as education, healthcare, sanitation, urbanization, justice, livelihoods. Now, each of these areas, and especially when you look at a country like India, our challenges are very large because in India, obviously, the size and the dimensions of the country require us to think about scale and large issues in a very different way. Second is that they're complex because of the diversity and the interplay between socioeconomic factors, our history, and so on. It makes it very difficult to predict what would be the outcome of a societal change. And hence it's complex. And third, it is dynamic because we are a rapidly growing and evolving country. And so obviously things change, whether because of policies, political transitions, or even economic transitions. And so when you're in a situation, it's like a perfect storm where you have a large, complex, and dynamic situation. How do you drive change? The classical construct is to identify a specific problem, for example, say teacher training in education or remote healthcare access in case of healthcare. Select a small geography, do a pilot, and prove that your idea works, and then go about sort of replicating it again and again. But now, if you place this in the context of something that is large, then replication could take many lifetimes because it's not so easy to replicate across a country of 1.3 billion people. The second is, if it is complex, then replication will have challenges of diversity because something that you designed in Nagaland lands up in say Trivandrum. It is going to be extremely hard to replicate. And third, of course, it's dynamic. By the time you get cover, say, a tenth of the country, things would have changed. So how do we do this? And that is the challenge that we are trying to sort of work with, saying, how do you drive something systemic such that you can address such problems for a country like India? And not only India, if you take this to Africa, if you take it to Latin American countries, or if you take it to Southeast Asian countries, it would potentially be no different because in the end, these are fundamental human challenges and still they have a very different character.
Correct. So, again, for my viewers and listeners, if you can help me understand one of the challenges that you're working on, if it's not confidential, and just take me through the whole process.
Sure. So let's look at, probably let me take an easier field such as education, because everybody understands education. So one of the problems that we started picking up was saying, if you go to 2 schools in any country, you will find that they are dramatically different in their performance, even under the same circumstances. So maybe the same kind of people from extremely challenged backgrounds, say, for example, migrant labor in India, or same kinds of budgets because the government schools have a very small budget outlay, or same capacity of teachers, but one school does extremely well and one does not. So why? And so we started unpacking that problem way back in 2016 and realized that the leadership of the school makes a massive difference. Who is the person leading that school? Their ability, their entrepreneurship, their ability to get support of the community, get their resources organized. And we said now India is a country of 1.5 million schools. So what does that mean? And on an average, if a school is run by 3 leaders, some senior teachers, head teachers, etc., then we're talking of 4.5 million leaders. How do you design a leadership development program for 4.5 million leaders? Was the problem statement to saying, how do we solve this? Anyways, over 2017, 2018, spending a lot of time on the ground with the teachers, we realized that they need 4 important capabilities. One is the ability to sense what's going on in the classroom, in the school, in a cluster of schools, in a district, in a block, in a state, because the sensing mechanisms are very, very poor. Second is, even if you're able to sense, you can't make sense compared to other schools, compared to my past performance, compared to best of the schools, benchmarks. How am I doing? How do I make sense of what's going on? Third is that I have realized that my challenges are in area 1, 2, 3, but I have no mechanism to learn. What should I do? How do I learn? And the last was saying, having learned, I need that motive power to actually make an improvement, because in the end, if we don't improve. And so we launched on this technological backbone, or a platform, if you will, which allows people in the education sector to sense, make sense, learn, and improve. So one of the other co-founders of Infosys, Shibulal, he decided to sort of set up a small venture where we started developing this technology to saying, how do you sense, make sense, learn, and improve? And how do you put this in the hands of 4.5 million people as a public good, as a free resource, not as a commercial paid service, right? So that got created. 2018, it went out. Today, where we stand, we operate in 10 states with about 4.5 lakh school leaders, 450,000, if you will, school leaders who work in making improvements, and it's growing at a very rapid pace. Recently, we went and extended into UP, we have extended to Bihar. And the simple thing is, how do we help them sense, make sense, learn, improve? But obviously, it's not as simple as that. Then you have to design programs, you have to work with the system, you have to work with the government, you have to create policies, you have to create motivations, incentives. So that is what makes it systemic. So if you look at this narrative that I shared with you, then there are 3 important things that are happening here. One, there's a shared digital backbone that is getting created, right? It's a shared infrastructure. It's like the internet, it's like yes, right? It's the backbone. On top of that, there are about 140 NGOs who are looking and saying, oh, I can use this backbone and create solutions. Wow. Because what works in different parts of the country is very, very different. And then on top of that, there are programs running, which are adoption programs, along with the government, the ministries, the different state level government systems, to say, how do we get this adopted? How do we spread the knowledge? How do we... So it's obviously a very interesting systemic journey, because the entire system is involved. And I am not at all claiming any sort of success. These are long journeys. We have just begun. But the point is, we are starting to see change. Not see change in 10 schools or 20 schools. We are starting to see change in hundreds of thousands of schools. And that is what the whole point is. Make a small change, make a micro improvement in many schools, and slowly the equilibrium starts shifting. So I hope it gives you a sense of an example.
It does. But then I also want to ask you a related question, that when you are working in 10 states with across 450,000 schools, which are across multiple cultures, what are some of your challenges?
Yeah. So I think firstly, the whole design is such that it's solving together at scale, which means that I would not claim to say that I am working in these states. It's an ecosystem of many actors who are galvanized by this common backbone, who are working in these states. Because if I was to say that I know what it takes to work in 10 states, I would be wrong, because honestly, I don't know. But my partners in crime, they know, they are there on the ground with the people. They understand what is required to be done. So I think if I was to look at the challenges, the first important challenge is, how do you even bring people along on such a narrative that this is a way to do things, right? I shared this simple example saying, when you're designing something like this, it's important to understand that an elephant is not a big mouse. And 2000 mice is not an elephant either.
Correct.
If you truly wanted an elephant, then you have to design that elephant in the embryo so that it grows up to be one. And so when we design it in the embryo, others say, why are you doing this? There are proven ways, there are tested methods that have been done, right? I can tell you how to improve a school. But my question is, yes, you probably can tell me how to improve a school, but I want to know how to improve 450,000 schools simultaneously. And that's a different system, right? So getting this narrative across, bringing people along is, of course, a very, very difficult task. Second is, how do you sustain this? Because it takes a lot of energy to keep so people talk of systems change. I'm sure you would have heard this term many times, saying we need systems change. I'm saying our challenge probably is change systems. That the system is able to continue that pace of change by itself with the agency of the actors. That's extremely hard, because people change, things move. It's like in India there's a famous saying that in winters, if you have a short blanket, then if you cover your head, your feet come out, and if you cover your feet, your head comes out, right? So the question is, when you're dealing with a large system, how do you constantly orchestrate, constantly connect, is the second one. And third, and the last one, of course, is, how do you practice decentralized leadership? Because something of this type, the only way to succeed is to let go of leadership rather than assume it, because the leadership has to be at the endpoints, at the nodes, rather than any central entity. And neither our work, our organization, or even our partners for that matter. Ultimately, the leadership has to be expressed by the leader inside the school. And so you have to constantly push that out. And that obviously is not easy, because people feel a sense of challenge in terms of control, in terms of the ability to influence. It's a very complicated topic to sort of drive leadership.
Fascinating. Sanjay, I just love the two examples you gave me of the mouse and the elephant and the blanket in winter. I mean, this is amazing. And obviously you are a good storyteller. But, you have spoken to me about, you spoke about the sustainable development goals of the United Nations. There are 17 of them. And you said education is one of the areas that you're working on. Which of the other areas of the SDGs is EkStep for focusing on?
Again, I would sort of preface it by saying that EkStep focusing on is not the philosophy. The philosophy is, we essentially provide a method. Societal platform is not a technology; it is a method.
Okay.
Which different organizations focus on these SDGs. So across my portfolio of work, for example, education is the one we shared. Even EkStep does massive. This was the example I gave you, was the second foundation on education. EkStep itself, which I did not quote as an example, is an education-focused foundation. But then let's continue this into a lifelong learning journey. So skilling is a second area that we work. How do you skill and create employment opportunities for millions of people across the country? Then we work in financial inclusion, right? Is to saying, how do you ensure that people are able to get their livelihoods because of the kind of job as well as financial instruments, right? There is insurance, savings, and those kind of. How do you help people? So one of the platforms we work with, which is called Avanti Finance, is a platform that is focused on how do you provide affordable credit to improve livelihoods of 100 million first-time formal borrowers, people who have never formally borrowed money before, right? Who under normal circumstances will never get the money. We work in healthcare, so there's a project called ECHO right next door to where you are, which is focused on how do you democratize healthcare knowledge. For example, when COVID hit, ECHO was the platform used to develop 600,000 healthcare professionals in India to deal with COVID. It's a initiative, works with 34 countries in the area of applying this kind of thinking, of building networks, building platforms. Then we work in the area of water through one of the other foundations called Argyam, where the idea is water security for 100 million families. We work in areas such as urbanization through e-governments foundation, and we also work with a lot of social entrepreneur, so to say, collectives. For example, Ashoka Fellows. So we have a program running with 30 Ashoka Fellows across 14 countries in the world, where we are taking this way of thinking into the work they do. They work in justice, they work in neurodiversity, they work in healthcare, education, forest ecological conservation. So the whole idea is that there is a method, there is a construct in how you think of these things. We call it societal thinking. We apply societal thinking to build societal platforms. And this is a tacit knowledge which has been constructed to become an explicit construct, which we take to different social entrepreneurs as well as sometimes governments and different kinds of organizations to actually say, apply this and see if you can solve the problem systemically with speed, at scale, sustainably. Wow. That's the whole approach.
Fascinating. And your role as chief curator, would my definition of you being the conductor of an absolutely incredible orchestra be correct?
I think I would stay with the curator, and I'll tell you why.
I understand.
Because I believe that how to do this, the knowledge and the experience resides in the ecosystem. And so my job is, I'm not a scientist or a fresh innovator. I'm just connecting the dots. I am just finding out what people are doing and help them make this connection, saying, oh yeah, but this is not new, but the connections are making me think about it in a different way. So curation is the task of finding things, finding what connects and actually making the connects. And that's why I stick with saying, I don't think I am bringing something new to the world. I think I'm connecting what lots of people, hundreds of people are bringing through their lived experiences. And that's why I retain the curated place.
Fascinating. So moving on, when I was reading about you and about the organization, and there's talk of collaborating and co-creating. And you also said you're building an amazing infrastructure which will allow or enable large numbers of organizations to be able to tap in and find ways and means of working together. I'd love to understand from you, what are the advantages of collaborating and co-creating for individuals, societies, and organizations?
So let me sort of explain this with an example. Say, let's take a different sector than education, given that we have spoken about education. Let's talk about, say, healthcare. Now, in healthcare, one could go ahead and develop the healthcare protocol all over again and again and again.
Correct.
But that would not have any use. So collaboration would come handy. If you built a vaccine in one country, another country can use it. And if you build a certain, and then you remember all the discussion around intellectual property around vaccines. So the question is, how do you ensure that you are able to share assets? And assets means what? Assets means knowledge. Assets means technology. Assets means connections, networks of people. Assets means processes, protocols. Assets means data. So if you can conceive that situation, when we're dealing with large and complex problems, it is obviously going to be humongously effort intensive to do this again and again. So the first big advantage is to create a shared bank of or shared foundation of assets. Easier said than done, because most of the time people are extremely protective about their assets, and the creation of public goods or creation of open assets is a journey. But I think collaboration is the way to sort of bootstrap. If we are to achieve our sustainable development goals by 2030, and if we need that speed, there is no way but to reuse whatever others are building, because if everybody was to build it again, we won't make it. Anyway, with the pandemic, with a setback of about 10 years, we have a long journey to go to 20. So collaboration, essentially, I look at it as something which gives you speed, which gives you access. But it may not help you address diversity. Because just because you created an asset and I take it and I use it, doesn't mean I can use it in my context. And that's where co-creation comes in. Because co-creation means I'm going to take what you have done, I'm going to change it. And not only change it, which is customization, maybe A plus B equals C, which is something very different from either A or B, right? And maybe you and I will work together to create C. Right? So, and I am quoting Professor Venkat Ramaswamy who's one of the people from whom I learned co-creation as a construct, who said that everybody focuses on the complexities in the creation, right? Which is getting messy, breaking things up and reassembling them. So I think co-creation allows us to address diversity. So if we want scale, then we have to move with speed and we have to be able to address diversity. And that is why it's extremely important to leverage both collaboration and co-creation, one for speed and the other for diversity.
Fascinating. So, Sanjay, I've got time for only one more question. I wish I had much more time. But, you also speak about supporting social change leaders. And, you do this across civil society, governments, and markets as they solve problems. Please help me understand how you do this with an example.
So I do this in three ways. One is I participate in many incubators. So the Nudge Center for Social Innovation. I run an incubator of my own called Edumentum, where young social entrepreneurs who are trying to make a massive difference, they could have done many other things. They have brilliant talent, but they decide to work in the social areas. So how do we ensure we give them the mentoring, the networks, and the ability to actually work in difficult social problems? That is one mode. And the second mode is where I actually help them think about scale, because most of the time when people talk about scale, they actually talk about growth. So they'll say, I'm working in 10 schools, I'm scaling, I'll work in 50 schools next year. And saying, no, you're talking about growth. You will grow from 10 to 50. Scale means you tell me what's the size of the problem and what percentage of the problem are you handling and are you designing yourself. These are young people, 26, 27, 28-year-olds.
Correct.
And I said, you have the runway. If there is any hope that these problems will get solved, it is in your hands because you have 50 years of work life left ahead of you. I don't, right? So I spend a lot of time to help the young leaders think about scale, because if they think about scale, it's the whole elephant and the mouse story again. If they think about scale now, then 20 years later, they will crack the problem. But if they start thinking about scale 20 years later, then they will not crack the problem because they would have built the mouse already. So that's the second, which I participate in design. And the third important aspect I try to do is essentially identify some of the senior leaders who have been in the sector for the longest of the times. For example, Ashoka Fellows or people who have been entrepreneurs or serial entrepreneurs, and help them see if there is a way to pivot what they're doing. Rather than, because there is so much of experience there, but if they could just pivot that experience and apply it to large problems of our country, which they're already passionate about. So I think here is a knowledge bank, here is a way of thinking. If I can help you pivot, then the multiplication factor of what you're doing would be extremely high. So I would say this: fresh incubation, think about scale, and the experience, solid, great leaders, can I help them pivot?
Wow. What an amazing conversation, Sanjay. I mean, we have to stop now, but thank you so much for speaking to me. Thank you for talking to me at such length about the societal platform EkStep Foundation. And thank you for all these incredible stories and examples that you've given. I mean, with your permission, I may quote them, giving you credit in some places. Thank you again and good luck.
Thank you so much. It's been a privilege. All the very best.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.